Please, someone help her. The words came out of Nathaniel Crews thin and cracked, like he hadn't used his voice in days. Which, if you knew how Nathaniel lived, was probably close to the truth. Nobody stopped. The woman on the sidewalk outside the Regal Oaks shopping center wasn't making a scene. That was part of the problem. She had simply sat down on the concrete curb between a shuttered nail salon and a dollar store. Her walker folded beside her, one shoe half off, and she had stopped moving. People walked around her like she was a planter, a decoration, something permanent that belonged there. Nathaniel Eugene Crews was 67 years old. He drove a 2009 Ford Transit with a cracked passenger mirror and a heater that only worked if you hit the dashboard once, hard, with an open palm. He delivered prescriptions for Millfield Pharmacy 3 days a week and spent the other days doing odd jobs, patching gutters, hauling junk, whatever the neighborhood needed from someone who still showed up. He was built like a man who used to be bigger, shoulders that had carried things for decades, hands thick with old calluses, a face that people assumed had a hard story behind it and didn't usually ask about. He wasn't supposed to be at Regal Oaks. His route ended at Sycamore Street, but the van's GPS had rerouted him around a water main break, and here he was, pulling into a parking lot he didn't recognize, checking the clock, realizing he still had 2 stops before he could call it a day. He saw her when he stepped out to check the address on his clipboard. A small woman, 70s maybe, white hair pinned back with the kind of clip that hadn't been fashionable since 1987, blue cardigan, tan slacks. She wasn't slumped. She was sitting upright, perfectly still, which was somehow worse, like a clock that had just stopped. A man in a business suit walked past her with his phone to his ear, eyes straight ahead. A woman with a stroller glanced down, then kept moving. A teenager on a skateboard curved around her without breaking stride. Nathaniel looked at his clipboard, then back at the woman. Then he put the clipboard on the seat, locked the van, and walked over. "Ma'am? Excuse me, ma'am. You doing all right?" She didn't answer immediately. Then, slowly, she turned her head. Her eyes were focused, sharp, not confused, just exhausted in the way of someone who has been pushing against something for a long time and has simply temporarily run out of push. "I sat down," she said. "I just needed a minute." Her hands were in her lap. They were trembling, not from cold. It was 62 degrees, mild for April. Something else. "How long have you been out here?" A pause. She thought about it honestly, the way people do when they've lost track. A little while. Nathaniel knelt beside her, one knee on the concrete, which cost him more than it used to. He looked at her face. Color was off, lips dry, and there was a small orange prescription bag from a different pharmacy sitting on the ground beside the walker, unopened. "You pick those up today?" She nodded. "You take anything?" "No, I was going to. When I got home." He looked at the bag, looked at her. "Where's home?" She named a building. Pemberton Arms, 2 miles east. She'd ridden the bus to the pharmacy. The return bus had been canceled. Service disruption. The sign at the stop said, "No estimated resumption." "Made it decided far as here. That was 40 minutes ago. Can I call someone for you?" Her chin lifted slightly. "There's no one to call." She said it without bitterness. "Just fact. The way you state a fact you've had a long time to get used to." Nathaniel stood up. "Okay. Then I'm going to drive you home." She looked at him for the first time, really looked. The wariness there was honest, and he didn't take offense at it. A woman in her 70s, alone on a sidewalk, being approached by a stranger who drove a van. He understood the math. "I've got a pharmacy badge on my jacket," he said. "You can call Millfield and confirm. The number's on the badge. You can call from right here before we take one step." She looked at the badge. Then she reached into her purse, pulled out a phone with a cracked screen, held together by a rubber band, and she called the number. He stood back while she talked, gave her space, watched 2 more people walk past her without slowing down. The woman at Millfield apparently told her that yes, Nathaniel Crews was their delivery driver, that he'd worked for them for 4 years without a complaint, and that he was trustworthy enough that they'd given him a key to the pharmacy's back entrance. He heard the woman say thank you and end the call. She put the phone away, let out a breath. All right. He folded her walker, loaded it into the back of the transit, and helped her into the passenger seat. She was lighter than she should have been. He buckled her seatbelt because her hands were still shaking and she didn't argue. He turned the heat on, hit the dashboard once, hard. It came on. She blinked. Old trick, he said. My name is Iris Whitmore, she said. Nathaniel Crews. Nice to meet you. He pulled out of the parking lot. The 2 remaining deliveries were going to be late. He'd call ahead. It wasn't the first time something had come up on a route, and the people who ran Millfield, a husband and wife who'd owned it since 1991, had never once docked his pay for a delay he couldn't help. How long have you lived at Pemberton Arms? 11 years. Since my husband passed. He didn't fill the silence after that, just drove. After a moment she spoke again. I used to drive myself everywhere, she said it quietly, to the windshield more than to him. Stopped 2 years ago, eyes. He nodded. I don't ask for help, she added. I want to be clear about that. I don't make a habit of it. I know, he said. I could tell. She looked at him. The ones who don't ask are usually sitting exactly where you were sitting, he said. Not asking. Something shifted in her face. Not quite a smile, but something. They pulled up to Pemberton Arms, a 6-story building, with a faded awning and a ramp that needed repainting. He got her walker from the back, walked her to the elevator, rode up to the 4th floor without being invited, but also without being told not to. He carried her prescription bag. At her door, she turned. She was going to thank him, and that was going to be the end of it. He could see inside when she opened the door. The apartment was small, clean, carefully maintained. But there were things that needed doing. A curtain rod hanging at an angle, a dripping sound from somewhere, a light bulb out in the hallway fixture. The kind of things that accumulate when there's no one to call and you've decided not to ask. You've got a curtain rod coming down, he said. I know, I can fix that, and whatever's dripping. She studied him. You don't have to do that. I've got 20 minutes before my next call. She let him in. He fixed the curtain rod, tightened the faucet under the bathroom sink, replaced the light bulb with a spare from the utility closet she told him was in the hall. She stood in the doorway of the kitchen while he worked, watching like someone who was deciding whether to trust something they hadn't trusted in a long time. He washed his hands at the kitchen sink. She'd set a glass of water on the counter for him without being asked. Take your medication, he said, before I go. She already had it out. He nodded, left her his number on a piece of paper torn from his clipboard, case anything else needs looking at. She held the paper like it was something she didn't quite know what to do with. He left. He was 17 minutes late to his next stop. The woman at the door, a retired school teacher named Mrs. Pontefract, who'd been getting her blood pressure medication delivered for 2 years, took one look at him and said, You look like you helped somebody. He didn't explain. She told him she wasn't in a hurry anyway. That was a Thursday. Nathaniel didn't think much more about Iris Whitmore, not in the way of expecting anything. He'd helped someone who needed it. He'd done it before. He'd do it again. It was just what you did, or it was supposed to be. He had other things to think about. His granddaughter, Amara, his daughter's girl, 9 years old, the kind of child who organized her stuffed animals alphabetically and corrected her teachers politely but firmly, was staying with him for the week, while her mother, Nathaniel's daughter Renata, recovered from a minor surgery. Renata lived 2 neighborhoods over. She was a dental hygienist, single parent, same as Nathaniel had been, the apple. Amara had been with him since Monday. She slept in the second bedroom, the one Nathaniel still thought of as Renata's room, even though Renata hadn't slept there in 20 years. He'd put fresh sheets on and bought apple juice boxes because those were the ones Amara liked. She'd told him on her first night that his pillow arrangement was suboptimal, and then she'd rearranged all of them. He hadn't moved them back. Friday morning, Amara sat at the kitchen table eating toast, one foot swinging under the chair, working through a library book on the history of bridges. She read the way some kids played video games, fully absorbed. No peripheral awareness whatsoever. Grandpa, did you know the Brooklyn Bridge took 14 years to build? I did not know that. One of the main engineers died from tetanus. Then his wife took over the project. She was one of the first women to manage something that big. That right. Her name was Emily Roebling. She's not in a lot of the history books. He looked at his granddaughter over his coffee cup. She was still looking at the book. That doesn't seem fair, he said. No, she agreed. It doesn't. He drove to Millfield for his route. The owners, Bernard and Kathleen Osei, who'd come to this country from Ghana in 1986, and built a pharmacy that the neighborhood had come to treat as a kind of community center, had left him a sticky note on the dispatch board. Everything okay yesterday? Heard you had a longer route. He wrote back, all good, small situation, handled. They'd understand, they always did. The route took him past Regal Oaks. He slowed, almost without meaning to, at the spot where the curb curved near the shuttered nail salon. Empty now, just concrete. He thought about 30 people walking past Iris Whitmore. He hadn't counted, but it felt like 30. He kept driving. Saturday morning, Amara found him in the backyard repainting the fence, which had needed it for 2 years, and which he'd finally run out of excuses not to do. She came out in her pajamas, hair in 2 braids that were beginning to come loose, and stood watching him with her arms crossed. Can I help? You're in your pajamas. I'll change. She changed. She came back. He gave her a smaller brush and the section near the gate that was low enough to reach. She painted with intense concentration, tongue slightly out, each stroke deliberate. After a while she said, Mom says you used to play guitar. Used to. What happened? He thought about it honestly. Kept meaning to get back to it. She painted 2 more fence pickets. Do you miss it? Sometimes. You should get back to it. He looked at her. Emily Roebling finished the bridge, she said. She didn't just mean the fence. He went back to his section of fence. But he was smiling, and she saw it, and she didn't say anything else because she'd made her point. That afternoon, his phone rang, a number he didn't recognize. Mr. Crews? Yes, this is Dorothy Aldgate. I'm calling on behalf of Iris Whitmore. You helped her on Thursday, he remembered. Is she all right? She's fine. She'd like to know if you're available tomorrow. Sunday, for brunch. Nathaniel paused. Brunch, at her apartment. She wanted me to clarify that she is not the type of person who hosts brunch, and she'd like you to understand this is unusual for her. Her words. He almost laughed. Tell her I'd be honored. One more thing. Dorothy Aldgate's voice shifted, just slightly, something careful in it, measuring something. She asked me to ask whether you have family you could bring. She says, and I'm quoting directly, that she suspects you have someone worth meeting. He looked out the window at Amara, who had found his old guitar on the shelf in the living room, and was attempting to play a chord with both hands, tongue still out, completely at peace with being bad at something she'd just started. I do, he said. Sunday, Pemberton Arms, 4th floor. Amara wore her second-best dress, because Nathaniel told her they were going to visit someone's home, and she should show respect. She told him that respect was shown through behavior, not clothing, but she wore the dress anyway. She brought the library book because she said Iris seemed like someone who would appreciate the Emily Roebling story. Nathaniel brought nothing, then turned back and grabbed the piece of paper with his number on it that he'd given Iris, which he'd found tucked under his wiper blade on Friday with a note on the other side. Thank you, Whitmore. He wasn't sure why he brought it. He just did. Iris Whitmore answered the door in slacks and a blouse, hair properly pinned, bearing the alert dignity of a woman who had decided this mattered. Her apartment smelled like coffee and something baked. She had made, she informed them, a coffee cake, which she had learned to make at the age of 32 and had been making ever since. And she did not consider it to be the same as hosting brunch. She was simply using what she had. Amara said it smelled wonderful and asked if she could pet the cat she could see sitting on the windowsill. His name is Lemon, Iris said. He doesn't usually like people. Amara walked slowly to the window, held out one hand and waited. After a moment, Lemon sniffed her fingers and bumped his head against them. Iris watched this with an expression Nathaniel couldn't quite read. Then she said, Sit down, both of you. They sat. She poured coffee for Nathaniel and apple juice for Amara, which she produced from the refrigerator without being asked. He noticed the curtain rod was holding fine. The bathroom was probably quiet. The hall light was on. She asked Amara what she was reading. Amara told her about Emily Roebling. Iris listened without interruption, and when Amara finished, Iris said simply, "I worked with a woman like that once. Long time ago. She never got the credit either, a beat. But she knew what she'd built." Amara considered this. "Do you think she minded?" "I think she was too busy finishing the work to mind." Amara nodded, satisfied. After a little while, Iris asked Amara if she'd like to see the puzzle she was working on, which was currently spread across the dining table. Amara went to look, and the two of them began talking quietly about which sections to work on first, and Nathaniel found himself simply sitting with his coffee in someone else's living room for the first time. In longer than he could remember. Not fixing anything, not delivering anything, just sitting. Iris came back to the kitchen doorway. Her voice was different now. "Queter," she said. "I looked you up, Mr. Crews." She said it plainly, no apology in it. That's how she was. "After Thursday," she said. "I wanted to know." He nodded. "That's fair. You've lived in this neighborhood for," she paused, 31 years. 32. You drove for Metro Transit before Millfield. 19 years. And you ran a vocational program through the Eastgate Community Center. Adult job training, electrical and plumbing certification. 8 years. Until the funding was cut. She looked at him steadily. "Why did you stop?" He turned the coffee cup in his hands. The center closed. Took the program with it. "Did you try to reopen it?" He met her eyes. "I tried." She accepted that. Looked away for a moment. When she looked back, there was something in her face that hadn't been there before Thursday. Or maybe it had been there, and he just hadn't been close enough to see it. "I have a question to ask you," she said, "and I want you to understand that I don't ask for help. So this is unusual." He waited. Iris Whitmore set her coffee cup down on the counter. She'd been the managing director of Whitmore Aldgate Consulting for 28 years. She told him this without preamble, the same way she'd told him her name. The firm had worked in workforce development, housing policy, community infrastructure, contracts with municipalities, school districts, health systems, nonprofits. She'd retired 4 years ago when her eyesight made the reading impossible. Dorothy Aldgate, the woman who'd called him, was her former business partner and still her closest friend. "The firm still ran," she said. "Dorothy runs it now, but we have something in the works. Something I've been thinking about for 3 years." He listened. She turned toward the window. Lemon had moved from the sill to Amara's lap during the puzzle conversation, and was now deeply asleep. Neither of them looked over. Neither wanted to break it. "There is a building," Iris said. 12 blocks from here. Former warehouse. The city acquired it 5 years ago for community development. It's been sitting. We've submitted a proposal twice to turn it into a vocational training facility. Electrical certification, plumbing, HVAC, construction trades, real credentials. Job placement partnerships with 3 contractors who've already signed letters of intent. The funding has been in place. The proposal has been approved twice. What we don't have, what we've been unable to find, is someone to run it. Nathaniel was very still. "Not manage it from an office," she said. "Run it, be in it, know what the neighborhood needs because they're from it." He set his coffee cup down. "We made the mistake twice," she said, "of bringing in someone credentialed from outside. Both times it fell apart before the first cohort graduated, because they didn't understand what the students were carrying when they walked in the door. The second time," she said quietly, "I lost a student because nobody caught that he was choosing between class tuition and his kid's insulin." She stopped. He could hear that she'd carried that. Every word of it. We needed someone who would have caught it. Nathaniel thought about his daughter working 2 jobs before she became a dental hygienist. He thought about the 8 years he'd spent in a room above a hardware store every Tuesday and Thursday night, teaching adults who'd been told they weren't good enough for a second chance that they were, in fact, exactly that. He thought about how it had ended. The last class, the apologetic letter from the center's director, the stack of half-finished workbooks he still had in a box in his garage. He said, "Tell me about the building," she told him. 15,000 square feet. Updated last year, city contract, good bones. 3 training bays. A resource room. A small lending library for technical manuals. Capacity for 40 students per cohort. She'd already spoken to 2 unions about apprenticeship pipelines. She had a list of instructors who'd said yes, pending a program director. A program director, he said. That's the title. What it actually is, she said, is the person who stands at the door on day 1 and makes sure every person who walks through it understands they belong there. He was quiet for a long time. He said, "I'd need to talk to Bernard and Kathleen." The pharmacy. I can't just disappear on them. Obviously, I'd want to keep one route. Tuesdays. There are people on that route who've been waiting on me for years. She didn't hesitate. One route is fine. He looked at her. Why me? He said it honestly, not fishing. Why specifically me? Because you drove me home when nobody else stopped, she said. And when you got inside my apartment, you didn't see Charity. You saw a curtain rod. He didn't have an answer for that. She reached into the small desk by the kitchen doorway and put a card on the counter between them. Plain, clean. Dorothy Aldgate's name on it, and a number, and the words Whitmore Aldgate Community Partners. Think about it, Iris said. As long as you need. He picked the card up. He didn't put it down. From the dining room, Amara's voice, I found the corner pieces. Do you want to start with the border or work inward? I always start with the border, Iris called back. It gives you something to work within. Nathaniel looked at the card. Then he stood up and carried his coffee cup to the dining room and sat down at the table, and the 3 of them worked on the puzzle in the afternoon light. And for a little while, nobody said anything about any of it. The building on Halden Street opened 11 months later. It didn't happen fast. That was the honest version. There were months of meetings. City permits that required 3 separate approval cycles. A budget renegotiation when the cost of updated ventilation in the training bays came in higher than projected. 2 contractors who backed out and 1 who came in later and proved better than the 2 combined. Dorothy Aldgate sitting across from Nathaniel in a conference room every other week, reviewing timelines, her reading glasses halfway down her nose, saying things like this is normal. It's always like this. It does eventually end. Nathaniel kept his Tuesday route. He told Bernard and Kathleen what was happening, and Bernard shook his hand for a long time without saying anything. And Kathleen cried briefly and then acted like she hadn't. They hired a second driver and told Nathaniel his Tuesday slot was open as long as he wanted it. Amara named the program. He hadn't asked her to. She'd come to see the building with him in September, when it was still a construction site. Hard hat on, boots that were too big, completely undeterred by this. She'd walked every bay, read every posted blueprint, asked questions that made the general contractor pause and answer carefully. On the drive home, she'd said, "You should call it Halden Works." Simple, he said. Simple as honest. He looked at her. She was already reading again. He didn't know what he'd done to deserve this kid in his life. Halden Works. He kept it. Opening day was a Tuesday morning, which was the only day Nathaniel had said mattered, because it was his route day and he was going to do both. He finished deliveries by 10, drove to Halden Street, changed into a clean shirt in the van. Iris Whitmore cut the ribbon. Dorothy Aldgate stood beside her. Nathaniel stood on the other side with Amara, who was holding the scissors because the ceremonial scissors were enormous and he'd decided someone should get some use out of them. She cut cleanly, one precise motion, and then immediately handed them back like she'd completed a task and was ready for the next one. There were 31 students in the first cohort. He knew each of them by name before they arrived because he'd spent 2 months talking to every person who'd applied, not reading their applications. Talking to them. Phone calls. Coffee. Sometimes just sitting on a bench outside the building while the renovation continued behind them. A woman named. She went by Teddy, short for something she said she'd stopped using in 1999. Who was 54. and had spent 20 years as a home health aide and wanted an electrical certification because she was tired of watching her clients get overcharged by contractors who knew the women had no one to double-check the work. A man who'd been inside for 8 years and had spent 4 of them getting certified in HVAC, and just needed someone to take the certifications seriously. His name was Jerome, a 22-year-old whose father had told her that trades were for boys, so she'd come to prove something, and then, once she was inside, found she didn't need to prove it to anyone but herself. On day 1, Nathaniel stood at the door. He didn't make a speech. He shook every hand. He looked every person in the eye. When they were all inside, he said one thing: "Whatever brought you here, you made it. Everything else starts now." That was all. Iris came by on the 3rd week. She walked the bays the same way Amara had walked the construction site, carefully, asking sharp questions, not performing interest but actually interested. She watched Teddy work through a circuit diagram with an instructor, watched Jerome walk a group of 4 through an HVAC unit, with the calm authority of someone who simply knew things and wanted others to know them too. She found Nathaniel in the resource room, reorganizing the manual lending shelves. She stood in the doorway, said, "You caught it, didn't you? About the student with the insulin." He didn't ask how she knew. She was the kind of person who found out things. "There's a discretionary fund now," he said, "in the budget. Nobody has to ask, it's just available." Jerome helped design the intake process. He knew what to look for. She was quiet. He kept straightening books. "The good ones don't broadcast their problems," he said. "They don't say anything until it's too late. So you build a system that doesn't require them to." Iris Whitmore looked at this man who had spent 32 years in a neighborhood, driving routes and fixing things and teaching in a room above a hardware store, and who had on a Thursday afternoon simply stopped and knelt on a concrete curb. She said, "Your mother raised you right." He looked at her. "She raised me," he said simply. Everything after that was practice. On the wall by the main entrance, when you walked in, there were 2 things in frames. The first was the piece of paper, his clipboard paper, torn edge, slightly creased, with his phone number in his handwriting, and on the back in neat pen, "Thank you. I. Whitmore." Below the frame, a small brass plate read, "It only takes 1. The second was a bridge, a pencil drawing, careful and deliberate, 2 braids visible at the edge of the frame where the artist had leaned in close while working. Below it, in the same careful hand, "She finished it. So will you." Below the drawing, smaller, "Amara Crews, age 9. He hadn't asked her for it. She'd folded it and put it in his jacket pocket on the drive home from the construction site. He hadn't found it until that evening. By then she was already asleep. He'd held it for a while at the kitchen table. This small paper with a pencil bridge on it, a thing drawn by a child who believed in built things. Then he'd put it in the frame. The program ran its first full year with 31 students. At the end, 24 had earned at least 1 certification. 19 were placed in jobs with Whitfield partner contractors. The union pipelines, Dorothy had spent 2 years building, average starting wage, $47 an hour. Jerome was hired by one of the contractors to head a training division. He called Nathaniel on his first day and didn't say much, just, "I'm here." And Nathaniel said, "I know. Go do your thing." Teddy passed her electrical exam on the first attempt. She told Nathaniel afterward that she'd gone back to 3 of her former clients and inspected the work the contractors had done, found 2 violations, filed reports, sat with her clients while the corrections were made, for free. She said, "Now I know," he said. "That's the whole point." The 22-year-old's father came to the certification ceremony. He sat in the back. He didn't say anything to Nathaniel. But when his daughter crossed the floor in her work boots and took her certificate from Iris Whitmore's hands, he was crying, and he wasn't trying to hide it. Nathaniel noticed. He didn't say anything. Some things you don't need to narrate. 1 year after opening day, on a Tuesday, Nathaniel finished his route. Still Tuesdays. Still the same people. Mrs. Ponifract still telling him he looked like he'd helped somebody. And he drove to Halden Street for the second cohort's first day. He was walking from the van when he saw a man sitting on the curb outside the building. Young, maybe 25. Thin jacket for October, staring at his phone like the news it was delivering was something he was trying to figure out how to absorb. Nathaniel stopped. Hey, you here for the program? The man looked up, wary. Yeah, I think so. You think so? I got the letter. He looked at the building. I don't know if I'm actually supposed to be here. Nathaniel looked at him. What's your name? Dominic. Nathaniel put out his hand. Nathaniel Crews. I run this place. You're exactly supposed to be here. Dominic shook his hand. He was trying not to look like he was deciding whether to believe that. How'd you find us? My neighbor. Old woman, 4th floor of my building. She told me to go. Showed me the application herself. Iris, he said. Her name was Iris. Nathaniel looked at him for a long moment. Then he picked up the clipboard he was carrying and tucked it under his arm. She's got good judgment, he said. Come on in. They walked through the door together, and the second cohort of Halden Works began. I keep thinking about that Thursday afternoon in the Regal Oaks parking lot, about the people who walked past Iris Whitmore. I'm not going to pretend I don't understand why they kept going. I do. We're all moving, we're all behind on something. We tell ourselves we'd stop if we knew it was serious, but serious never announces itself. It just looks like an old woman sitting on a curb. Here's what I've learned from Nathaniel's story. Helping doesn't require certainty. He didn't know who she was. He didn't know if she needed him. He didn't wait until he was sure. He just stopped. And I think about how much of what matters in this world gets decided in that 1 second. Before your brain talks you out of it, before you calculate the cost, before you wonder whether it's your place. That 1 second where you either stop or you don't. Nathaniel stopped, not because he had extra time or extra money or an easy life that had space for it. He stopped because he was the kind of person who stops. Nobody made him that way on Thursday afternoon. He'd been that way for 32 years. So here's what I want you to sit with. If this story meant something to you, don't wait to help until you have more. Don't wait until it's convenient. Don't wait until you're certain someone needs it. Stop. Ask. See what happens. You don't know who you're kneeling next to. You don't know what you're starting. You don't know what bridge you might be part of finishing, but you won't find out by walking past. Drop a comment and tell me, would you have stopped? I actually want to know. Share this if you think someone in your life needs to hear it today. And subscribe if you want more stories like this one, because there are more. There are always more. Thank you for being here.